Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The government has announced long-term housing arrangement plans for residents of Wangfu Court in Tai Po after the housing complex was devastated by last year's number 5 alarm fire. Authorities said the buyout plan covering flats of the 7 affected blocks cost around $6.8 billion. Offers for units for which the land premium had not been paid would be $8,000 per square foot, while units with the premium paid up would be $10,500.
The government announced its plans for the long-term housing arrangement for Wangfu Court residents this afternoon, with authorities having received more than 90% of responses for its questionnaire for property owners of the damaged housing estate. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong said 74% of those surveyed are considering the government's offer to acquire ownership of all the flats directly. Large numbers of them agree to a flat-for-flat exchange or cash buyout scheme. Besides the unaffected Wangxi House, all 7 other buildings will be purchased by the government. Under the current arrangement, offers for units for which the land premium had not been paid would be $8,000 per square foot, while units with the premium paid up would be $10,500. The total figure will reach $6.8 billion, while the government will pay $4 billion in subsidies from public coffers. Michael Wong also explained the reasons for not rebuilding on the original site.
In formulating the government's package, it is impossible to satisfy the wish of everyone. We are talking, after all, about over 1,900 different owner tenants. The greatest difficulty is the time required. We have explained that it will require at least 9 to 10 years before these arrangements can allow the owner tenants to move back.
To facilitate residents opting for the flat-for-flat exchange scheme, the government will prioritize their selections for some apartments from the Housing Authority. Authorities emphasize the 7 affected structures were damaged beyond repair and must be demolished. Initial plans include transforming the site into a park or for community facilities.
The U.S. Supreme Court struck down President Donald Trump's far-reaching global tariffs on Friday, handing him a stinging loss on an issue crucial to his political and economic agenda. Furious about the defeat, Trump said he'll impose a global 10% tariff as an alternative while pressing his trade policies by other means. The new tariffs come under a law that restricts them to 150 days. Tracy Furness has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump lashed out at the Supreme Court for striking down much of his sweeping tariffs on more than 100 countries and regions, saying it was an illegal use of emergency power. The Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling centered on the policies under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The court said the act does not grant the president authority to impose tariffs, effectively making Trump's global tariffs illegal.
The Supreme Court's decision today made a president's ability to both regulate trade and impose tariffs more powerful and more crystal clear rather than less. I don't think they meant that. I'm sure they didn't. Today I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies.
Trump had made tariffs the bedrock of his economic pitch to voters going into the midterm elections, even describing tariffs as his favorite word in the dictionary. He promised factories would relocate from overseas and bring jobs with them, and warned that losing the tariffs could plunge the U.S. into a deep recession.
What happened with the Supreme Court ruling was a rare yet pointed rebuke of President Trump's power. They said he exceeded his authority. And what we have seen as the president has tried to concentrate more power inside the White House is not a lot of pushback by Congress, but that dam is starting to break. Earlier this month, Congress said that they opposed Trump's tariffs on Canada. We've seen the Federal Reserve stress their independence. And now we've said that the Supreme Court believes that Trump cannot go as far as he would like to go.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The Supreme Court's decision prompted cautious optimism from the U.S. and around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron said the ruling shows it is good to have counterweights to power. Daniel Rao tells us more.
U.S. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer heralded the striking down of the tariffs. He said the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court was a win for the wallets of every American consumer.
So today, the Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs were unlawful. The court agreed with what Democrats have said from day one. A president cannot ignore Congress and unilaterally slap these tariffs on the American people. Today's SCOTUS decision was a win for the wallets of every American consumer that carried the burden of Trump's stupid trade war, and now he's doing it all over again and hurting the American people.
A U.S. business owner said the damage already done by the tariffs could prove insurmountable.
I'm glad to see that our Supreme Court has stepped up for America today and is hearing the people and seeing actual constitutional issues and addressing those. But the price is already up. So I don't think my rosés from Germany are going to suddenly be $2 less next year. I think everything's going to pretty much stay as it is, and we're all going to have to continue to eat these costs.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, who's been engaged in intensive tariff negotiations with the U.S. administration, addressed the U.S. Supreme Court ruling during her morning press briefing, saying we're going to wait and see its reach. Mexico's biggest trading partner is the U.S., has been able to dodge the brunt of the tariffs by more aggressively going after drug cartels under pressure from the Trump administration. The British government said it will continue to advocate for the best deal for the UK after the tariffs were struck down.
It's now really a matter for the US administration to respond to. What I can say from our position as a UK government is what our position will continue to be, which is to stand up for British businesses and get the best possible deal, because that's what we've been doing throughout all of our discussions with the US administration about tariffs in recent months since the last general election, and we'll be working with the US administration in the future to make sure we get the best deal for our businesses.
French President Emmanuel Macron said the U.S. Supreme Court ruling shows it is good to have counterweights to power and the rule of law in democracies. He added France would consider the consequences of Trump's new 10% global tariff and adapt, and the country wants to continue to export its products, including agricultural, luxury, fashion and aeronautical goods. General TV News.
Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Christopher Hui, said U.S. President Donald Trump's latest 10% global tariffs will not affect Hong Kong. Political commentator Lau Siu-kai said Trump will not give up on tariffs. Most Night reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced a new 10% global tariff on Friday after the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled against his plans to impose tax on foreign countries' goods. Speaking to the media on Saturday, Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury Christopher Hui said the tariffs will not affect Hong Kong much and that the city will continue to be a stable market for international investors.
One of the advantages is the certainty in terms of how we regulate the market and the overall stability of our overall environment. And this fiasco, I think, basically highlights the importance of Hong Kong in this area.
When asked about the significance of the court's ruling and Trump's new tariffs, political commentator Lau Siu-kai said Trump will continue to use tariffs as his core economic tool.
Trump will not abandon tariffs as his major weapon. That means even though the Supreme Court declares as illegal his use of the emergency powers to impose tariffs on other countries, but Trump can still use other legal weapons, particularly the U.S. Trade Act, to serve his purposes. Basically, the whole situation has not changed.
As the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Trump's global tariffs, the White House announced that the president will visit China for 3 days from March 31st to April 2nd. What would the ruling mean to China-U.S. relations?
From China's point of view, even though Trump loses the Supreme Court legal battle, he can still impose tariffs on China by other means. So basically, I think the Supreme Court decision has nothing to do with Sino-American relationship.
Lau also said that the developments will not impact Hong Kong. Mums 9, TVB News.
The U.S. military said it has carried out another deadly strike on a vessel accused of trafficking drugs in the eastern Pacific Ocean, killing 3 people. U.S. Southern Command said the boat was transiting along known narco-trafficking routes in the eastern Pacific and was engaged in narco-trafficking operations. The attack raises the death toll from U.S. President Donald Trump's administration's strikes on alleged drug boats to at least 148 people in at least 43 attacks, which were carried out since early September in the Caribbean Sea and eastern Pacific Ocean. Critics have questioned when the U.S. military has the authority for such killings in open seas. Welcome back. Thousands of people across the city queued outside betting stations on Saturday for a Mark 6 snowball draw that has a potential top prize of $200 million. This marks the largest ever Lunar New Year draw and the highest dividend payout in Mark 6 history. Mosinai reports.
This was the scene outside the Jockey Club's betting station on Stanley Street in Central on Saturday morning. And if you think that's the end of the queue, you are wrong. The queue has stretched all the way to Wellington Street by noon. Some people said they had no idea how to spend the money if they did win the first prize, but all expressed excitement.
The prize is very big, that's why maybe I'm lucky. I'm lucky this time. They say this is the luckiest.
How long have you been waiting in the queue?
Maybe already one hour.
And you think it's worth the wait?
It's worth, no problem.
Inside the betting station, people are busy selecting the lucky numbers. Tickets for the Mark 6 are on sale up until 9:50 p.m. on Saturday, while the draw will be held at 9:30 p.m. Mark 6 snowball draws are often held on special seasonal or festive occasions, including the Lunar New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival. Mosinai, TVB News.
At least 10 people were killed and 50 wounded in Israeli strikes in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley on Friday, after the Israeli military said it had targeted Hezbollah sites in the Baalbek area. The strikes are among the deadliest reported in eastern Lebanon in recent weeks. The Israeli military said it struck Hezbollah command centers in the Baalbek area, part of eastern Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Sources said a senior Hezbollah official was among the dead. Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a U.S.-brokered ceasefire in 2024, intended to end more than a year of cross-border fire that culminated in Israeli strikes that weakened the Iran-aligned group. The British government will consider new legislation to remove Andrew Mountbatten Windsor from the line of royal succession once the ongoing police investigation into his ties with Jeffrey Epstein is over. Any changes to the line of succession would require consultation and agreement with King Charles III and with other countries where he is head of state. Tracy Furness has more.
The British government Friday was considering formally removing the former Prince Andrew from the line of succession to the crown. Despite losing his status as prince and facing a police investigation, Andrew remains 8th in line to the throne. UK's Chief Secretary to the Treasury was asked if Andrew's place in royal succession should be removed. He said it was complicated.
Any conversations about the point that you just raised are, complicated and will have to be, discussed in the future. But right now, there's a live investigation the police are undertaking, and it's really important that that investigation is able to continue without any interference, with its integrity intact.
The last time a royal was removed from the line of succession was after the abdication of King Edward VIII in 1936, when the law was changed to strike him and any descendants from the line. Removing Andrew would also require agreement from more than a dozen other countries, including Canada, Australia and Jamaica, that have the British monarch as head of state. This comes as the former British prince was arrested Thursday on suspicion of misconduct in office. Andrew denies any wrongdoing. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
U.S. military jets were launched to intercept 5 Russian aircraft that were flying in international airspace off Alaska's western coast. But military officials said the Russian aircraft were not seen as provocative. The North American Aerospace Defense Command said it detected and tracked 5 Russian aircraft operating in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone on February 19th. The U.S. Department of Defense said the Russian aircraft did not enter U.S. or Canadian airspace and remain in international airspace. Russian activity in the zone is a regular occurrence and is not seen as a threat, according to the U.S. Department of Defense. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.